Episode number 67, Who You Can Become When Life Doesn't Go As Planned with Sheridan Voysey. Guys, a couple questions that really press into your heart are, what do you do when life doesn't go as planned? You know, we make plans in our lives. Sometimes they're big plans. Sometimes they're plans that are very important to us. And what do you do when life doesn't go as planned? Or maybe you have big dreams and you're working toward big goals, and you have a big vision for where you want to go in life and who you want to become and what you want your family to look like and those types of things. But what do you do when those dreams are crushed? What do you do when it is readily apparent that things aren't going to go as you planned, that God is definitely leading you in a different direction, and the dream that you thought you had is not going to be fulfilled? Sheridan Voysey is a man who knows all about life not going as planned and dreams being crushed. He's our guest this week, and we talk about all that he's learned over the past 20 years from his different life experiences. Gentlemen, there's so much more to life than the plans and dreams that you have. It can be devastating when those plans and dreams are crushed, but there is hope. Sheridan teaches us how to move from broken pieces to new beginnings. Now, before we jump into the show, I want to let you know that we do have a free resource for you guys that are new listeners to the show. It's 5 Days to Be a Better Dad Challenge. You can head on over to the show notes after the show. You'll see it there, and then you can join the challenge. Show notes and resources can be found at dadhackers.us/067. What's up, Dad Hackers? My name is Patrick Antonucci, and I am the host and founder of this podcast and community of Dad Hackers. Well, Dad Hackers is a community of Christian fathers who are devoted to encouraging, equipping, and enabling one another to become the men that God has created and called us to be, so that we can raise up the next generation of fully devoted followers of Christ and leave a legacy of multi-generational faithfulness. Now, on this show, we primarily interview Christian men to dive deep into their experiences and insights into what it means to be a Christian man, a Christian husband, a Christian father, and a Christian leader. We ask questions that dig deep into the thinking and rationale and experiences of these men so that we can all learn and grow into the men that God is calling us to be. I'm so thankful that you've joined us today. Make sure you subscribe so that you never miss any of our value-packed episodes. Also, please make sure you leave an honest review if you're listening to this in iTunes or any other platform that takes reviews. Reviews boost the show's ratings, which means that more dads are going to come across our show and benefit from the content that we put out. I also wanted to let you know that we do have a free private Facebook group just for Christian dads. So after the show, make sure you hop on over to the show notes. There's a link for that in there as well. All right, Sheridan, man, thank you so much for coming on the show today. How are you doing today?
Good to have this time with you, Patrick. Thanks for the open door. Appreciate it.
Sure, man. I think the conversation we're about to have is going to be very interesting. And so I'd like you to start off, if you could introduce yourself, give us some of your background, and then of who you are as a Christian and a man and those types of things. And then I'd like to dive into some of your backstory, because I think that it's very, very interesting, and it's going to be very enlightening for the men as they listen to your backstory as we proceed through the different topics that we're going to discuss.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll give you the basics then. So this little office that I'm talking to you in now is in Oxford, the United Kingdom. I was originally born in Australia, actually in Brisbane. Then after 26 years there, my wife and I moved over to Perth in Western Australia. That's the most isolated city in the world. We had 6.5 really good years there. And then we moved to Sydney for 5 years, then moved here in 2011. Much of what was kind of behind the moves, 20 odd years now, and so I was moving around to different radio stations and things, was in pastoral ministry and church-based ministry for a while, have been in church leadership in a number of positions and roles, and in parachurch ministry as well. So that's kind of the professional background. I released a book in 2005. That was the first of now 7. This latest one, The Making of Us, is book number 7. And speaking has been my other thing too. So writing, speaking, and broadcasting has been what's kind of taken me around the world. And married to Merrin, who is mine, hands off. You can't have her. And we've had 23 years of marriage so far. So that's the basics.
Awesome, man. Awesome. It's interesting to hear all the places that you've been and the things that you've done over the years. And congratulations on 23 years of marriage. My wife and I just celebrated 15 years this past May. And it's crazy how fast those years accumulate and build up. And you just, the blink of an eye, man. Blink of an eye.
Yeah, I think, it was only, it feels like just a decade ago when in fact it was 1995 that Merrin and I first met, and then we were married by the end of 1996. And yeah, that's right. It has gone so far, and we've covered so much territory together. I think that's the thing. And we've both individually changed. We've changed as a couple. I don't think we're in any way, shape, or form where we thought we would be way back then, looking ahead. But we're in a good place, which is great.
Yeah, and that'll be interesting because to hear some of that story, because that's one of the things we're going to talk about is who you can become when life doesn't go as planned. But before we jump into that, Sheridan, I'd like you to share some of your background with us, because unlike most of our guests, you are actually not a father. You don't have any biological children or any adopted children. And so I think your story is very interesting, and that's why I invited you to come on the show. And I'd like you to tell us some of the details of that story and your journey there.
Let me tell you about 2 stories about 2 dreams. So meeting Merrin in 1995, getting married in 1996. I think it was the same year in 1996, I was sitting by the Brisbane River dreaming of this particular kind of radio show. And it would be a show that would reach kind of the secular Australian with the things of Christian faith. And we would take both secularism seriously and Christian faith seriously, and we would see how those 2 can meet and where people's deepest longings could be found ultimately in a relationship with God. Fast forward 2006, and the reason why we've moved from Perth to Sydney is for me to start that show. So that 10-year dream, it took a while, but it finally came to fruition. And it was a show called Open House. It lasted for a good 11 or 12 years or so. And we had some amazing things happen, and very rapidly had a sizable audience on a Sunday night, half of which were Christians, half of which weren't. And so we were having that conversation that I'd always dreamt of. And we had live music, and we had outside broadcasts, and we had all sorts of people. You name the person, we may well have had them on the show. During that same 10 years, Merrin and I had another dream, and that dream was to start a family. And that's the dream that never came to fruition. So I remember the conversation that we had in the kitchen where Merrin said, "Honey, I think it's time." And I said, "Time for what?" And she said, "Time we started a family." And I said, "What, right now? Fantastic, let's go." And, from any couple knows that from that moment on, once you've made that decision, you're looking every 28 days for signs of success. And it's very common for the first month for there to be expectation followed by disappointment. That's common. Then a second month, expectation, disappointment. A third month, maybe expectation, disappointment. Maybe a fourth month, expectation, excitement, because you finally get the positive news. Well, after 9 months of expectation followed by disappointment, we went and got some tests done, and those tests revealed that there was a problem on my side, and that without either a divine miracle or some sort of technological assistance, we would be struggling to have a child. And Patrick, that was the beginning of a decade of trying to start a family. And we tried numerous rounds of in vitro fertilization. We tried special diets. We tried healing prayer, obviously. We tried chiropractic, and to this day, I do not know why. You try everything you can, right? We even tried adoption. We sat pretty much for about 3 years trying to adopt in Sydney. And the phone call never came for us to collect our little boy or little girl. And finally, by the end of 2010, Merrin was in a mess. Prayers hadn't been answered. Her faith was shot. She just couldn't handle the limbo that you are in when you are a childless couple over time trying to start a family. Every month, is this going to be the month that the expectation is met with excitement, or is it going to crush again? And so we did a whole round of final round of IVF rounds that we would just say, let's do as many rounds as it takes for this to work. And then on our very final round, in December of 2010, we had one embryo left, and we had decided, okay, we've given this 10 years. If this embryo doesn't result in a viable pregnancy, we're moving on as a childless couple. And would you believe that that was the one embryo that we received a phone call from Emily at the IVF clinic saying, it's looking good. And there was jubilation amongst our family and friends who had been wandering with us for 10 years through the wilderness. And finally, at the 11th hour, it looked like, we'd had the answer to our prayers. And then on Christmas Eve, would you believe it, of 2010, we had a phone call from Emily again from the IVF clinic saying, I'm sorry, it's not. And at that, Merrin, she walked into our bedroom, put the phone down, she curled up in a fetal position on the bed, and that's where the dream ended. And then we had to start again and kind of forge life on as a childless couple. Long story short, that resulted in us moving to the UK for her to take up a job at Oxford University. Kind of a new beginning for her, which started an all completely different path for me, trying to work out then who I was and what I was supposed to do, because things completely changed for me from that point on.
Wow, man. That's an amazing story. One of the things that comes to mind, a question I have, is how do you handle that disappointment of not being able to conceive, even though you've tried multiple times, and then seeing other families or seeing other people conceive and like seemingly effortlessly, or how do you reconcile seeing some people who don't even want children that have children or kind of just throwing them away? I'm sure you've wrestled with those thoughts and probably even some anger in there. How have you kind of reconciled that in your head and in your faith, and you were talking too about your wife's faith being kind of almost wrecked at some points?
There's two questions there, really. One is, how do we personally respond to it? And then how do we reconcile it? And they're both really important questions. So this latest book, The Making of Us, is a follow-on to a previous book called Resurrection Year. And in Resurrection Year, we really tell the story of that 10-year journey and coming to terms with childlessness. And there's a whole chapter where we spend some time at a place that some of our listeners may know of called Le Brie in Switzerland. It was started by Francis Schaeffer and his wife back in the 50s, basically kind of opening up their house, their little chalet in Switzerland, for people who had all sorts of questions to come in, and they were just given free space to be able to come and ask those questions, big philosophical, theological questions about whether there is a God, and if so, what's all the problems with the world? How does that interact? And so we went and spent some time there, and we spent a whole chapter in the book is wrestling with that. Why? Why did we not get the answer to prayer when other people have children when they don't want to? Or indeed, as you mentioned, they have children and then they neglect them. One of the most moving scenes in that book, people tell us, is when Merrin and I are sitting down watching the news one night, and a story comes on about an abandoned child found on a conveyor belt of a rubbish recycling facility. This baby had just been thrown away, and she had to get up and get out of the room, because how, after everything that we were going through, could then that person be given the child? So we delve into that a lot more in Resurrection Year. There are no easy answers, Patrick. There are no easy answers. The broad theological answer is the fact that we are not in heaven yet, and that this is a broken world, and that God provides enough space for humans to be able to do all manner of things, including have sex whenever they want, and maybe get pregnant when they don't want, and indeed even the freedom to treat other people badly, including children. To take away that freedom would mean that he would somehow have to orchestrate every little thing that happens, and then we wouldn't be free to love. And without love, there is no ultimate humanity. There is no ultimate freedom in life. That's the theological answer. But when a couple is really going through the depths of this particular wilderness, that doesn't cut it. They want to know, why has God not come through now for us right now when he has for other people? And that's a hard one. And you know what? To this day, I'm starting to get an answer, but I don't have an answer for you as to why God gave other people children and not us a child. We would have been great parents. Lots of people said that. I don't have any answer for you as to why we were ultimately given no. What I can tell you is that in the process then, our story and our experience has been redeemed, and it's been recycled into something quite powerful for other people, and has led to a ministry, an opportunity to serve other people that I otherwise never would have seen, that has been more fruitful in the last 5 or 6 years than the last 10 or 15 years put together.
That's a great answer, because I think you can apply that same answer to any context, not just childlessness, but any situation where things seem unfair, things seem unjust, where you're going through a very difficult time and you feel like God is not coming through for you. You feel like God is not answering the prayers in the way that he should. You feel like God is maybe being silent, or even tempted to believe that God has it in for you in one way or another. But can you speak more on how your story has been redeemed? Just tease that out a little bit more, see the fruit of that.
Yeah. So there are 2 or 3 steps to it. Number 1 was going public with our story. And I have to say, Patrick, this was never the topic that I wanted to go public on and to be talking to people like yourself on podcasts like this about. I didn't want to be known as the infertility guy. I didn't want to be known as the guy with low sperm count. You know, that wasn't the thing that wasn't my brand.
Right.
It turned out that there's quite a well-known British author here in the United Kingdom named Adrian Plass. And one day we were having a weekend with him and his wife, and our whole story, the 10-year story, was kind of coming out of the space of this 10 years, of this weekend. And at the end of that weekend, he and I were sitting in his lounge room. Rain was softly falling outside. The fire was softly glowing, and we were sipping port, if I remember correctly. Now, man, I had never done that in Sydney. That's the kind of thing that you do when you come to England, you know, feeling like a very English man. And so we're sitting there, and out of the blue, Adrian says, "Have you thought about writing your story into a book?" And it was the farthest thing on my mind for us to go public about our story of infertility and everything. And he said, "I think it could help a lot of people." I really didn't think Merrin was going to be open to doing it, and I didn't know if I wanted to do it, but we kind of prayed about it, came back, and then thought it would be a good thing to do. That was Resurrection Year. And what happened with going public about our story is it did 2 things. Number 1, that specific broken dream of not being able to have children actually connected with a much broader audience than just childless couples. It actually connected us with single folks who had always wanted to get married but hadn't been able to. Connected us with people who had lost careers or never been able to have careers that they'd wanted to. All sorts of broken dreams. So it connected much bigger, which was a great surprise to me, that if you talk about any broken dream in the right way, it can actually connect you emotionally and spiritually with people whose experience is far different to yours, but the essential journey is the same, one of longing, a lack of fulfillment, and now who am I and what can I become? The second thing it did is it kind of connected us with a tribe of people that by going public, it was like we rolled up our sleeves and we bared our kind of special brands that had been given to us that gave us entrance to a tribe. If you study tribes, you find that what often happens is that people are taken away into the wilderness. They are put through a set of very difficult experiences. Sometimes they're even left alone for weeks on end, to fend for themselves. And then they go through this kind of trial. Afterwards, they come back. They are different people. They're often then marked with some sort of special tribal brand, perhaps, and they are allowed back into the tribe with different status. That's kind of what happened to us, that going through our 10-year wilderness gave us credibility to speak into so many people's lives that we never had before.
Yeah.
That resulted in God being able to somehow use it in some kind of profound way. One story to illustrate. I was speaking at a fairly sizable church up in York in the north of England. Some people will know that this is actually a church that was once run by David Watson. Some of our listeners might remember David Watson wrote some very famous choruses and wrote some very well-read books. And I was speaking up there about our story, and I was talking about how God redeems these difficult times. And this guy came up to me at the end of the service, and he said, I don't go to church. I've never been to this church. I don't know what I'm doing here, but as I was walking past the church, something drew me in. And then I listened to your story. And he said, I've got broken dreams. I've got estranged children that won't talk to me. I'm divorced. A wife won't have anything to do with me. And he said, tonight, I was planning to take my life. Wow. I was going to get wine drunk. I was going to walk off that bridge just down the road. But now, after hearing what you've had to say, I now believe I'm a child of God and God can redeem my story too. And that's just one of hundreds, maybe even thousands of stories that I could tell you of people who, as a result of just hearing somebody go through the wilderness and yet still keep their faith and find that actually God can turn it to be the very thing that equips you to serve and help other people, gave him hope and he came to faith. It was a pretty amazing moment.
That's amazing. I think that's a great illustration of how God can use your story of brokenness to really help the process of mending other people. And that's so interesting, that story of tribes and how you kind of had your 10 years in the wilderness. And while you probably didn't go out literally in the woods and have to fight for yourself and go pick berries to live and kill animals to eat food and start a fire with sticks and stones or anything, you did have to really go through some deep stuff and some very, very trying times, and coming out on the other side. It's so interesting how you put it. You now have credibility to speak into other people's lives. And I'd like you to talk more about this whole concept of when life doesn't go as planned, or when the dream that you have doesn't come to fulfillment and you feel like you have a calling in one area or another, and it's not working out that way. And there's some indications in your life that door is definitely closed. It's not happening, but you were so attached to that. You mentioned there's some common themes or common elements that all these have in common. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that to help some guys out who are experiencing broken dreams right now.
Every dream carries with it an identity. And you think about that. If you want to become an artist, well, hello, what have I just said? You have become an artist. If you want to have children, well, the associated identity with that is father. If you want to go into racing, then you will become a driver. So every dream carries with it an identity, and therefore every broken dream carries with it a broken identity as well. It's something that you can't become. And so we have to kind of wrestle with this whole thing. Well, then who can I become now? That's been a huge journey for me. So I mentioned that we came to the United Kingdom for Merrin to take up a role at Oxford University, which was a fantastic gig for her to get. And she has just gone on from strength to strength to strength. I mean, she is consulting to the World Health Organization now. She's doing all sorts of things, going over and contributing to various research projects in all manner of countries. She's just found her sweet spot vocationally. So it's been an amazing move. But all the things that were working so well for me in Australia, like that 10-year dream fulfilled of a radio show, like book contracts, like great speaking gigs. I got to speak to members and senators at Australia's Parliament House. When I moved to the United Kingdom, all dried up. And so for a while I was thinking to myself, well, hang on a sec, I've spent all these years as a writer, speaker, broadcaster, 3 identities. And what's going to happen now if nobody's going to publish my books, or nobody wants me on their radio shows, or nobody wants me to come and speak at their events? And I had to look at that question of identity. Look, long story short, and the whole of The Making of Us is written, to talk about that very thing of identity and then who you can become. Let me give a couple of things. Number one, all of us, but particularly us guys, I think, limit our identities to 1 or 2 things. And generally, it's normally around, number 1, vocation, number 2, parenthood. So who are we? Well, I'm an engineer and I'm a father of 3. And so that tends to become how we define ourselves. We are bigger than that. Right at this very moment, I may not be a father, but I am actually a son, and I'm a husband, and I am a brother, and I'm a friend. I'm an uncle, I'm a neighbor, I'm a citizen. I actually have a raft of identities right this very moment, all of which are generally ignored when we are out to pursue our dream, because that's the one thing that we want. So it's been an amazing thing to discover. I am much bigger than I thought I was. I am much bigger. And I've spoken at events and conferences, and I've had people come up to me in tears afterwards and said, I so needed to hear that because I've been so fixated on becoming a parent. I've forgotten that I've already got a husband or a wife. I've already got friends. I've already got these relationships that to some degree I've ignored, and I haven't placed as much value on those identities as much as I should. We have really neglected the holy calling of friendship. I mean, man, it's one thing that I really go into quite a bit in The Making of Us, because the story is based around a pilgrimage between a friend and I, my friend DJ and I. We go on this 10-day pilgrimage together. But then we look at the lives of some great Christian missionaries of the past in England, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th century saints, as they're now called, who had tremendous soul friends. And looking at the great calling they gave each other to be soul friends, people who really walked through the wilderness with each other, could ask tough questions of each other. We would call them accountability partners now, but it's far beyond that. These are soul friends. People go deep together. Now, when was the last time that you proudly said to somebody who asked you what you did, I'm a friend? It's not something we generally jumps to the top of our mind. Profound calling to be a friend. So I'm bigger than I am. I'm my personality. Why do I particularly like soul and funk between the years of 1982 and 1987, the glory years? Why do I particularly like that? What is it in me that makes me love that kind of music? That's something that's a part of who I am. It's a part of my identity, part of my personality. I'm a pretty good listener. I'm not a bad communicator. All of those things are part. I'm not a father, but all of these things are part of who I am. So number one, we shortchange ourselves. We are bigger than we think we are. Number two, most of those identities I've mentioned can all be taken away. And there is only one identity that can't be taken away. And that is this profound identity of being a child of God. Some of our listeners will know that phrase, 1 John 3, how great the love the Father has lavished on us that we should be called children of God. I had given lip service to that. In fact, I'd given professional lip service to it. I had written articles on that verse. I had preached sermons on that verse. But I'm telling you now, Patrick, when you go through the wilderness and all the other identities are taken away from you, that's when you really discover is if it's really gone down deep into your very being. And it's been a great journey to be able to say, that now is my sole identity. Not my sole identity, it's my core identity. It's the very essence of everything else. This is what can keep you alone in your room when there's nothing else going well for you, but you know that you have a father, and you know that your purpose and your value and the very essence of who you are is bound up in something that can't be touched by the things of this world, or taken by the things of this world, by sickness or failure or success or anything else. So those are the two things that I would leave people with in terms of identity. We're bigger than we are. And at the very core is this offer that you can be a child of God. And that is where you ultimately must find your deepest sense of value and assurance.
All I got to say is amen to that. I was actually speaking yesterday at a church, and I was talking about manhood, and I took them back to Genesis chapter 1, when God created man, and he created man in his own image, man and woman. And that's not said about any other piece of God's creation. And I think we forget that we are significant, valuable, accepted, loved, wanted, purposefully created by God. And lots of times men in particular go around trying to prove themselves, or get validation from the world, or from a spouse, or from children, or from a friend. But we already have it in God, because he's given us his stamp of approval by giving us his, by creating us in his image. And we already have that. We already have that. And Sheridan, I wanted to ask you, intellectually, I can wrap my brain around everything that you've said, but how do we move it down a foot and a half from our brain to our heart? Like you said, lots of times you gave lip service to 1 John 1:3, but how did it go from your head to your heart? Because I think that's real, and you might not be able to answer it completely, in a podcast episode. I'm sure in the book you get into it in more detail, but what are some, I don't know, is there steps? Are there tips? Are there things you can like do? Or I don't know, there's like a mindset shift that has to occur, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, there really is. Yeah. And there are things that we can do. I mean, this is part of the very core of becoming more our true selves. And I use that phrase reluctantly and hesitantly, because I believe actually, rather than the kind of secular concept of a true self where I just become who I deeply am, becoming a true self is to actually follow Jesus' call to be perfect as your Heavenly Father is perfect. Now, that at first sounds like something that's going to keep us on the psychiatrist's couch for like years to come, because who can be perfect, like God is perfect? Ultimately, he's saying all of us as human beings seek to become something bigger than ourselves. And as teenagers, of course, it's the heroes that we put up on our wall with posters or put up on our phone, people that we worship, the music that we worship, all of that. As we get older, then it's just other great heroes that we seek to emulate. We just want to have people above us that we want to become like. And basically, Jesus in that verse, I believe, is saying, one of the things that he's saying is, set God as the ultimate hero, the ultimate model that you're to become like. That's how you then become your true self, because then you become the godly Patrick. Then you become, the godly Sheridan. The Sheridan that still somehow has his personality and his traits and his idiosyncrasies, at least the good ones, but then becomes Christ-like in the midst of that, so that goodness, grace, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, all of those things filter through that personality that we have. So this is part of our journey of becoming more like Christ, becoming sanctified. So the whole idea of our identity dropping from our head to our heart, it's a great question. This is the great gift that going through a season of loss can give you, is that you're kind of, the support structures that you've built around your identity of being very comfortable. I had a guy, I was speaking to a board, and I was up in this high-rise building and speaking to this highfalutin board of high-power board members. And he said, I've got no experience of what you've been through. I don't know a thing about what it means. I've always had life go well for me. And on the one hand, I was grateful that he hadn't been through some sort of significant loss. On the other hand, I was kind of a bit sad, because actually it's when you go through these times, when the support structures are taken away, that then you've got nothing left. And so what do you have left? It becomes so much more clear. But there are things you can do even if life has gone well. Number one, you can every day recite 1 John chapter 3, how great the love the Father has lavished on us that we should be called children of God. Ephesians 5, 1-2 is my other favorite verse. That's where Paul says, be imitators of God as dearly loved children and live a life of love, just as Christ sacrificed himself for us. You've got the 3 points of your essential calling there. Be imitators of God, right? He's the model. Number 2, as dearly loved children. This is your essential identity. It's already given to you. Don't chase your essential identity in anything else that you do. Number 3, then once you've got those 2 things in place, then go and live a life of love. And this is to be the core of everything you do through your work, through your parenting, through your art, through the engineering work you do on your trucks, whatever it might be. Love is the core of everything that flows through you. Memorize those things. Go on a retreat. Spend hours just resting in that. Be comfortable with yourself in your room by yourself. And then secondly, I would say, have a group of people around you who are truly there for who you are and are not there because of the professional roles that you have. I found this quite difficult in Sydney because I was quite well known in Sydney because of the radio show, and then also in Melbourne because it was a national show. It actually was broadcast to in the end, about 10 cities. And so particularly in Sydney, though, I was quite well known. And so if I went to any church, even just as a visitor, it wouldn't take long for somebody to recognize the voice or whatever. And then I was back into kind of professional mode, and people were looking at me as the broadcaster. I had a Friday night group of people. We jokingly called it the Croydon Centre for Spiritual Enlightenment. It was because we met in Croydon, and it was just this funny little thing of saying, this is a group of friends. We would call it a small group, right? A church small group, but actually it was from a variety of different churches, and we just met together. We were so different. Some were conservative politically, some were radical politically, but we were all committed Christians, and we were all there to support each other. I don't think they even listened to the show that I was hosting. I was Sheridan, and so they could support me as me. And that was actually, I look back now, a real gift. You don't need more than 1, 2, 3, 4 people that are just there who they know you as you. Maybe you go back to childhood and they knew you back before you had all your success. Those are the kind of people that can help ground you, so we can go and really let this idea of being something beyond our profession drop from the head to the heart.
That's pretty cool. One of the big things in our Dad Hackers community is this idea of brotherhood and surrounding yourself with other men who are in the same journey as you. And we also have a mastermind group that meets weekly virtually. We call ourselves the Iron Men. And we're working to achieve that whole second point of gathering around yourself a group of other men who are there, and they have your best interest in mind. They'll call you on the carpet if they need to. They'll encourage you when you need encouragement. They'll give advice when you ask for advice, and they'll pray for you every day if necessary. And I think that's so very true. Kind of shifting.
Good.
But pardon me?
So just so good. I'm so glad to hear that. It's just so important. And I think the other thing that we could add into that is, in that mastermind group, in those groups that you're facilitating, is there a moment, and it takes time, shouldn't be upfront, but is there a time when then you can reveal your greatest vulnerability? Going public about the fact that I got low sperm count, there's nothing left for me to share. And so you find that once there are those things that you can share that, make you at your most vulnerable, then you find that actually you can develop those closer relationships.
Yeah, I think a couple things when you mentioned sharing your greatest vulnerability. Number one, you're exposing something that you think is dark, or perhaps darkness, and you're exposing it to the light, and you're getting it out there. And then on the other side, people see you being vulnerable, and then they're more likely to be vulnerable. And then you realize that you're not the only one. A classic example is a very high percentage of Christian men, even men in Christian leadership, struggle with lust and pornography. And while that's not right, a lot of men live in guilt and shame and isolation in that. And a lot of freedom is found when you confess that, and when you gather yourself or gather other men around yourself who have struggled in that same area. And we don't always need to maybe write a book about it or blast it all over social media, but that's the purpose, I think, of what you're getting into with having this group of people, the 1, 2, 3, 4 very, very close friends that you can reveal these things to. Because there's a lot of healing that happens in confession. Whenever you confess sins, or confess a vulnerability, or confess something you're ashamed of to another human being. It's one thing to confess to God, and that's necessary, but confessing to another human being and really calling on the body of Christ for one of its purposes has a great impact.
Yeah, fully agree.
But before we wrap up, I wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit about the hidden stigma of being a childless Christian man, because, well, again, a lot of our listeners are men who are fathers. They don't have this stigma. I think some of the things that you'll probably talk about could apply to other stigmas. I know we just talked about guys that struggle with lust or pornography, guys that have struggled with addictions, guys that have struggled with struggled in other areas of life. And maybe something you say as you talk about this can resonate with them and really help them. So I'll let you have the floor for that for a little bit.
Well, going public with our story then opened up the door for other people that were secretly in the tribe to then come and make themselves known. So it is very rare now that I don't speak at a conference. Might be a men's conference, it might be just at a church, it might just be a general Christian conference, where then a guy doesn't pull me aside around the corner where nobody else can see and will then say, hey, that's my challenge. My wife and I haven't been able to have children, and I feel like it has attacked my very masculinity. This is such a common experience that I have had, that there is this shame associated with it. And you know, why is there shame associated with it? I think it's because we've falsely built up this picture of masculinity as being validated once you've married and sired. I mean, even the other day, only about a week ago, I saw a tweet from a pastor, and he said this: the essence of manhood is moving from son to husband and father. Hashtag man up. Now, I get the idea. I get the idea that we are to grow in responsibility. And I get the idea that a whole bunch of guys are not fulfilling their responsibilities and are staying as teenagers. I get that. But what he didn't see, and what he wouldn't see, because a number of people challenged him on it, is that actually that's not the essence of manhood. Not biblically. That's not the essence of manhood at all. If that's the essence of manhood, then first of all, Jesus doesn't meet it. Because Jesus never married and never had children. And yet, who is the ultimate man?
Right.
The Apostle Paul would then be guilty of even preaching against that doctrine, because he talked about the value of actually staying single for the kingdom of God as well as Jesus did. That's not the essence of manhood from the biblical perspective one bit. And yet it is there. It's there in our churches. It's there in our culture. We see it all the time in TV. We see it when somebody finally announces that they're going to have a child for the first time, and they'll say, finally, finally I'm a man. There's this kind of sense in which once you become a father, you've proved yourself, you've proved your virility. And by the way, infertility does not mean a lack of virility. Completely different things. And this is why sometimes there's that shame involved. People think, oh, people are going to think that, I'm not virile. Completely different thing. So we've built up this picture, both in the culture and in the church, that to be a man is ultimately proven by siring a child. And so if you can't, then somehow you're less of a man. I hope that your podcast and conversations like this starts to dismantle that whole concept. You can be the most godly man possible as a single man to your dying day. Jesus proved it. You can actually be a godly man with 12 children. The essence is the fruit of the Spirit, right? Love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and sacrifice, which is the essence of what Jesus' manhood was all about. So that's part of it. So what has happened then is, as I've gone around and spoken on these things, I just keep on coming across so many men. Another guy just the other day, he's a pastor, youth pastor, not getting any support from his senior pastor leadership, getting a little bit of support from his denomination, somebody who knows. But he said, I can't talk to anybody about this. Nobody understands what it's like to go through that expectation and disappointment every month. Nobody understands what it's like to be wrestling with whether God's answering your prayers. And I'm supposed to be a youth pastor. I'm starting to doubt whether God even answers prayer or not. There are deep, you can tell I'm getting passionate about this because I'm glad that we're having this conversation with your audience, because even if it's not the thing that they've wrestled with, I'm pleading with you as a fellow man, would you open up the conversation and open up a safe space for the guys in your life who maybe haven't gotten married yet, or maybe haven't, it's been a while, you can see that maybe they haven't had children. Now that might be their choice, and so don't, intrude on that. But there could well be, almost undoubtedly, guys within your circle that are wrestling with this in some kind of way and do not feel like they can talk to you about it. Please become the kind of man that they can talk to about it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of the things that you're talking about with that as it pertains to manhood and this misunderstanding of what it means to be a man can just eventually trail back to where is our identity coming from. And our core identity needs to come from being a child of God and being one of his sons, and not from something we do or some role that we have or something that we accomplish. I think God did put in us a strong desire to have children, because that's how you populate the earth and that's how you spread the gospel. But as with a lot of things, God gives us great gifts, but those gifts are not where our core identity should come from. And lots of times we get that mixed up and we get that reversed in our head. In the cultural messages and misconceptions within the church, and just like that preacher who you gave the example of his tweet, he was well-meaning in that, I'm sure, and he was really probably trying to rally men to stand up and take responsibility. But unfortunately, sometimes in our passion and our zeal for certain things, we can really be misguided or be misunderstood.
The worst part of that tweet wasn't the first bit, it was the last bit. It was the hashtag man up. It was this kind of legalistic thing that, if you're not that, then you need to man up. That's just erroneous on every level.
Yeah, because a lot of guys can't. And it's not because they're not a man. It's just maybe they were called to singleness, or maybe like yourself, where they just medically cannot bear children, and it's through no fault of their own. It's not from lack of trying. It's just that's their lot in life, I guess. And maybe they need to go back and start at the beginning of our conversation and listen to everything that we've talked about, because I think that it's very, very helpful in that regard.
Yeah. Well, if we can, break open the stigma, the more and more men that actually go public with it, the less and less the stigma there is. You think about depression. 10 years ago, men couldn't open up and talk about depression. It was something that was considered a weakness. that you would be taking antidepressant medication or something like that. Now, because of all sorts of, both in America, in the United Kingdom and Australia, a lot more men can talk about the fact that they've wrestled with depression because it's no longer, it doesn't have the stigma. I'm hoping that another 10 years or so, the same thing will be the case with childlessness.
Yeah. And I think, these are kind of amoral subjects. I mean, it's not a moral thing that you can't have children, and it's not necessarily a moral thing that you suffer with depression or suffer with anxiety or things like that. But I think a lot of things could be said for people that have been redeemed out of immoral lifestyles, like we were talking about lust and pornography, or maybe addictions, or maybe promiscuity, or maybe a gang life or whatever. And when you're redeemed out of that, it's hard to not let the past affect the future or influence the future, and you still have that stigma attached to you that, yeah, I was a drug addict, or yeah, I was very prostitute, or whatever. But now we have a new identity in Christ. We are a child of God, and if we could get that from the head to the heart in ourselves, and realize that about other people as well, and really value one another as children of God rather than what we can do or accomplish or have done,
Right.
I think we'll be on much better ground.
I'm with you.
Cool, man. Well, Sheridan, it's been great talking with you, brother. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I think guys are really, really going to benefit from it. And if guys want to get a hold of your book or connect more with what you're doing, or perhaps somebody wants to book you for a speaking event or something like that, or whatever, what's the best way to get connected with you or connected with what you're doing?
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate that. I speak in the US generally once a year, so I would love to come and speak at your event. So SheridanVoysey.com is the website address. You'll find that Sheridan Voysey isn't a very common name, so you'll find that I'm Sheridan Voysey on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, so you'll find me everywhere there. So the book is The Making of Us. Excuse the shameless plug. So also, that's probably the easiest website to go to, themakingofus.com. That's where you can find out about the book. You can download a little creed that I put together that really kind of brings together some of the things that we've been talking about. I actually read that every day. It's actually up on my wall there. It's something you can print out. You can read it every day. It might help that journey we were talking about from the head to the heart of just recalibrating who we most deeply are. That's been quite a blessing to many people. I'd love to connect with people there. Themakingofus.com will find me, and look forward to having more connections with you and more contact with your audience.
Awesome, man. Yeah, and I'll be sure to link all that up in the show notes after the show, so guys can easily take advantage of that and get connected with you, and maybe even grab your book while they're at it. Now, Sheridan, one last question, and we talked about this before the show. I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, what makes a great dad? And even though obviously you're not a dad from our whole conversation here, you have been a son, you do have an earthly father, and you do have a heavenly father. And so I value your opinion on what makes a great dad. So I'm excited to hear it.
Yeah. Well, let me take something from my earthly father. My dad, I know without a doubt, has always been my greatest champion. And so there is something which I know that Dad is going to be encouraging me with what I've just written or what I've just spoken about. Or, my dad is the first one to go and download all the interviews that I do on other people's shows and listen to them. He'll be the first one to be watching this and listening to this one as well, I'm sure. To have a father who's a champion of you is just such a gift. So I'm going to take that from him. To be a champion of your children, that of course doesn't negate the fact that you need to correct them, but there's times where you just need to champion them, and that's a great gift. Can't go past the character of God in light of the conversation that we've been through. And, I'm always struck by that revelation that God gives to Moses in Exodus 34. He says, wait, and my glory is going to pass by you. And did you notice what he doesn't say? God comes and then he says, the Lord, the Lord. And what he says next is not the Creator and the King and the Redeemer and the Sustainer, all of which are appropriate professional roles that you could say God has. He says, the Lord, gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, showing love to 1,000 generations that call on my name, and forgiving wickedness and sin. The very first thing that God says about himself actually isn't his professional roles, it's his character, it's his very essence. And so I think that good fatherhood will follow that. Gracious, compassionate, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness. All of those are pretty good traits to take.
Awesome, Sheridan. Well, thank you so much for your answer. I thank you so much for your wisdom and your insight and your words today. And I really appreciate and I'm honored to have you on the show today. So thank you very much.
Man, thanks for the time. It's been a great conversation. Thank you.
All right, man. Take care. Okay, gentlemen, there's our show with Sheridan Voysey. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope our conversation was a blessing to you and that you learned something from all that Sheridan has shared with us today. I wanted to quickly remind you that we're working to greatly increase our reviews on iTunes. iTunes reviews boost the show's ratings, which in turn means that more men will hear these life-changing interviews. iTunes will promote the podcast more. It will show up more in searches. So if you could go to iTunes and leave a quick written review, guys, this will take 30 seconds. Just a sentence or two is all that's needed. That would be much appreciated. Then if you take a screenshot of it, shoot me a message on Facebook or Instagram with the message and your physical address, and I'll send you a free Dad Hackers decal as a special thank you. Once you do that, head on over to dadhackers.us/067 to get the show notes. While you're there, you'll find links for that 5-day email challenge that I talked about. You'll find links for Sheridan and his resources and how to connect with him, as well as more opportunities to connect with the Dad Hackers community. All right, fellas, until next time, remember Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another.